The wind howled through the rafters of the old station, a haunting melody that echoed through the empty halls. The once bustling hub was now a ghostly relic of the past, its silence broken only by the mournful wail of the wind. Rain lashed down, each drop exploding on the cracked concrete platform. The relentless downpour seemed to wash away the memories of happier times, leaving behind only the cold, hard reality of abandonment. Emily shivered, pulling her coat tighter around her. The cold seeped into her bones, and she felt a chill that was more than just the weather. It was the chill of isolation, of being utterly alone in a place that time had forgotten. She was alone, a lone figure in a sea of shadows, lit only by the flickering gas lamp above. The light cast eerie shadows that danced around her, making her feel as if she were being watched by unseen eyes. Her heart pounded in her chest, each tick of the station clock echoing the fear in her heart. The sound was a constant reminder of the passing time, each second dragging on as she waited for something, anything, to break the silence. Where was everyone? Why was this train so late? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. She glanced around, hoping to see another soul, but the platform remained empty. The screech of metal on metal pierced the night, a jarring sound that shattered the stillness. It was a sound that promised movement, change, and perhaps an end to her lonely vigil. Far off, two pinpoints of light cut through the darkness. They grew steadily brighter, piercing the thick fog that had settled over the station. The train was finally coming, a beacon of hope in the oppressive gloom. The train was coming. Finally, the sight of it brought a mix of relief and apprehension. What awaited her on that train? Would it bring answers or more questions? But a shiver ran down Emily's spine. Something wasn't right. The sense of foreboding grew stronger as the train drew nearer, its headlights casting long, eerie shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that this night was far from over. With a bone-rattling shudder, the train screeched to a halt. Steam billowed around Emily, momentarily blinding her. The doors hissed open, revealing an empty carriage. Completely empty, Emily hesitated. Something felt off. The air inside felt heavy, oppressive, like an unseen weight pressing down on her. But she had no choice. She had to get home. Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped onto the train. The doors slammed shut behind her with a finality that made her jump. She was trapped, alone with whatever was on this train. The train lurched forward, picking up speed with unnerving swiftness. Emily gripped the armrest, her knuckles turning white. She was the only passenger, surrounded by empty seats, or were they? In the window's reflection, she saw them. Figures, dark, indistinct shapes filling the seats around her. She whipped around, but the seats were empty, just her imagination. She tried to calm her racing heart. It was just nerves, that's all. But as she looked back at the window, the figures remained, staring back at her with empty, hollow eyes. A figure appeared at the end of the carriage, barely visible in the dim light. It seemed to blend with the shadows, almost as if it were a part of them. Tall, shrouded in shadow, its face obscured by the dim light. The figure stood motionless, an eerie presence that sent chills down her spine. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She could feel her heart racing, each beat echoing in her ears. She was no longer alone in her reflection. The shadowy figure loomed behind her, its presence undeniable and terrifying. He moved closer, each step deliberate, measured. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty carriage, growing louder with each passing second. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs, her body frozen in fear. She wanted to scream, to run, but she couldn't move. He stopped just a few feet away, his shadowed face tilted towards her. She could feel his gaze, cold and piercing. He raised his hand, a long, slender finger pointing directly at her. The gesture was slow, deliberate, and filled with an unspoken menace. No, not at her, at the reflection beside her. The realization sent a new wave of terror through her. The one with the terrified eyes, eyes that mirrored her own fear, yet seemed to belong to someone else entirely, the one that wasn't her. The reflection that seemed to have a life of its own, staring back at her with an intensity that was both familiar and alien. The figure in the reflection smiled, a smile that seemed to stretch beyond the limits of its face. It was a grotesque, unsettling grin that stretched its features impossibly wide, almost as if it was mocking her. Emily couldn't tear her eyes away. She was transfixed, her gaze locked onto the eerie figure. It felt like it was looking into her soul, piercing through her very being with its intense, haunting eyes. Slowly it lifted its hand, a pale, ghostly hand that shimmered in the dim light, almost as if it was made of mist. It gave her a small, delicate wave, a farewell gesture that felt both eerie and final. And then it was gone. The reflection vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The train screeched to a halt, the sound jarring her back to reality. Emily snapped out of her trance, her heart still racing, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She was in her station. The familiar surroundings brought a small measure of comfort. She leapt out of the train, stumbling onto the familiar platform, her legs feeling weak and unsteady. She spun around, but the train was already gone, vanished into the night as if it had never been there. But as the last of the train's lights disappeared, she could have sworn she saw it. A fleeting glimpse. A pale hand pressed against the window, waving goodbye, a final, haunting farewell.